Republican State Representative Brian Harrison of Midlothian, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Always great to be with you, Jack.
Nice to see you. Before we get started and talk about the controversy surrounding Texas A&M, I also wanted to start by asking you about the assassination that the whole world got to see of Charlie Kirk today. Your thoughts?
It was an absolute punch in the gut. It's simultaneously heartbreaking and infuriating, especially to those of us who are in very similar battles across the country to save the hearts, minds, and souls of the younger generations. I mean, Charlie made it his mission in life to proclaim truths to them in an area that has become some of the darkest parts of our country, and that's the illiberal elitists who have been indoctrinating the next generation, and he gave them a conservative alternative. He boldly proclaimed truth. And if anybody has any doubts, but there is both good and evil in the world, I think just watching the videos that are going around online would put that question to bed. What we saw today was pure evil. But I view it as something that conservatives, while we will mourn right now, we should not be tempted to shy away from the battle. And in fact, I think if anything, we should redouble our commitment to saving the next generation from the woke leftist nonsense that is permeating pretty much every aspect of academia, not just here in Texas, but across the United States. And I'd probably be remiss if I didn't note that I think one of the last public universities that Charlie Kirk ever commented on actually was the scandal at Texas A&M when he was on Fox News about 30 hours ago talking about the battle right here in our own backyard. And but just my prayers go to him and his family in this just horrifically heartbreaking time.
Wanted to ask you, just as far as when you take a wider view of political violence, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, it could have been, God forbid, we saw Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota assassinated earlier in the year. There have been other examples, obviously. So talk to me about that, people being able to speak freely and being shot.
Well, incredible. I mean, one of the highest profile cases of this, but for, I would say, the grace of God, but for President Trump turning his head at the right fraction of a second to look at an overhead projector, the same thing would have happened to him. And something that I don't think I've ever discussed on TV because of the positions that I've taken on these exact same issues we're here to talk about today. I received death threats, and in fact, DPS very recently had to arrest a person. Somebody's going to be going to trial very shortly for threatening my life. So this is the new reality that unfortunately we find ourselves in, and that's why I try to remind everybody in this movement that the movement's bigger than any one of us, and we have to redouble our efforts, even in the face of this heartbreaking tragedy. But this type of political violence, I want to be really clear, has no place in American political discourse, and I would call on every elected official of either party, of any party, to soundly reject these acts of violence.
So let's talk about the controversy surrounding this child literature class at Texas A&M University.
Yeah.
You have been out there speaking out. You put it out there for everybody to see.
Yep.
Why was this so important for you to speak out about this? And what exactly, walk us through, how did you even find out about this?
Yeah, so this is a battle that I've been in for several years since I got elected in 2021. I mean, after leaving, I had the honor of serving, as you know, Jack, as a senior member of President Trump's first administration. When I got elected into the Texas legislature on the heels of that in 2021, nothing could have prepared me for the shock of what I learned when I got down to Austin, which is that the Texas government, despite our reputation for leading the nation in things like freedom, individual liberty, small government, low taxes, low regulations, and conservative values, we have just been coasting on that reputation. And in fact, the Texas government, I now believe, may be one of the biggest funders of DEI and transgender indoctrination in all of the United States of America. So this is just one example that I put out, but I have, if somebody wants to go take a look at my public statements over the past couple of years, I have probably put out hundreds of examples of state agencies and our public universities engaged in taxpayer-funded DEI and transgender indoctrination. I have done everything in my power to stop it, including filing 14 pieces of legislation to end it. Every one of them, unfortunately, thwarted, not by Democrats, but by the elected Republican leadership in the state of Texas. And by the way, I gave the governor and his staff a binder about a foot thick of examples of public universities engaged in exactly the kind of thing that I have released video of Texas A&M doing. So this is not an isolated incident at Texas A&M, and this is what people need to understand. This exact type of liberal leftist indoctrination is happening in almost every public university campus in the state of Texas, and it's past time that we stand up and do the right thing for the next generation and the taxpayers and stop funding this nonsense in our public universities.
And so how did you find out about this?
My office was contacted by somebody who put us in touch with the student, and I have spoken with the student directly. The student and my office have had a good line of communication for the past few weeks. And even I was not surprised to learn this was going on, because again, I've seen it in hundreds of examples. I mean, I can't remember if it was to you, but I mean, I released a syllabus from a University of Texas course the other day where the teacher was coercing students to cross-dress in public in exchange for higher grades. So this type of thing I've known has been going on, but when you're able to see it with your own eyes, and I gotta tell you and commend this student who I've spoken to recently, to commend her and her courage, who had the foresight to video this professor forcing the students to memorize, and I'm not making this up, the gender unicorn, which is something that propagandizes extreme transgender ideology, not just to record that, but to secretly record her engagements with the president of Texas A&M University, a former Barack Obama appointee, and somebody for which she was in a significant power imbalance, to be able to maintain the poise and professionalism, even when the president of the Texas A&M University was berating her, mocking her, gaslighting her into convincing her that she was the problem, and then trying to convince her to participate in the cover-up that Texas A&M University is unfortunately about neck deep in, that they've been engaged in for the past month.
And this was a child literature class.
Yeah, this was not even, like we have these women's and gender studies departments. This was not there. This was in the English department in a children's literature course where the age of focus was for children ages 3 to 12.
And nowhere in the course description was there anything about gender identity being discussed as part of the curriculum.
That's
right?
what the university is hanging its hat on. It's unclear to me if that's true, because I've read the syllabus. I have the entire syllabus. I have more information than I have released publicly so far. And by the way, I keep telling Texas A&M that lying is not in their best interest here. They keep putting out these dishonest statements, and every time they do, I'm able to 12 hours later put out facts that disprove their contentions.
But the reason I ask is because a student coming into the course, they see a description. We were all students at a university.
Yeah.
You see a course description,
Children's
okay,
literature.
maybe this sounds interesting, I'll take it. But you're saying that gender identity was not in that description.
I'm saying I'm not sure, because what I'm saying is in the syllabus that I have reviewed personally, not only was it in there, it permeated the entire syllabus for the entire course. And it wasn't just transgenderism, it was DEI as well. I mean, the diversity and equity stuff was all the way through there. And in fact, the student, I have not talked about this part yet publicly, but the student, when she would even in writing assignments reference a character as a male character as a boy, the instructor would criticize her, critique her, and make her defend her contention that a male character was in fact a boy by making the student have to answer questions like, well, how do you know he was a boy? Was his hair short? Did he wear pants? Did he use he, him pronouns? This is the type of, I think it's a violation of her constitutional rights. I think it's borderline abusive, but it's for sure discrimination. And the student told the president of Texas A&M University, she used the word discrimination. She told him almost a month ago that she had been discriminated against, which is a violation of her constitutional rights. And the president of the university made it out to be her problem. He mocked her and literally said, what do you want me to do, fire her? And when she said yes, he dismissed her and said, well, that's not happening.
And why do you think that this was a violation of the student's constitutional rights?
She was discriminated against on the basis of her conservative beliefs, and her First Amendment free speech rights were absolutely violated. She was singled out of in this class for public humiliation. She was ejected from the classroom. She was ordered to leave by the government officials. This wasn't a private actor. This was the government and official acting on behalf of the government of the state of Texas, ejected her from a class and told her she was not welcome to return. And here's one of the biggest scandals that I think people have missed. When Texas A&M, which by the way learned about this a month ago, not 2 days ago like Texas A&M is pretending in their public statements, when they had the choice a month ago, when they learned about all of this, because they know everything you now and I and America now knows, they knew this a month ago. Instead of taking corrective action, instead of firing the professor, instead of firing the department head, which uses she, her pronouns in her signature block, by the way, instead of getting rid of the president, what did they do? They chose to punish the student, to harass the student, to threaten the student, to coerce her into silence, to threaten her with prosecution if the videos she had recorded were ever made public. And get this, in order to protect the professor and keep the indoctrination going, they tried to convince the student to never go back to the class. And if she just would never go back, they would give her an arbitrary grade that she could have for the course, denying her the education that she had paid for, and allowing Texas A&M to sweep this whole problem under the rug. This is one of the biggest scandals I've seen in Texas government here since I got elected.
And so what was the reaction what was her reaction when she actually got this in writing, this letter saying,
and you can see it.
We'll give you the grade that you have right now
Yeah.
if you don't go back?
Correct. Well, she, I think eventually she didn't accept the terms, and ultimately there was enough problems that were created that I think they ended up basically giving that deal to everybody, which is a disservice to all of the students. It makes a sham and a mockery out of the entire public education enterprise in higher education in the state of Texas.
So just leave and we'll give you the grade you have right now.
This is how desperate and dishonest and inexplicable and inexcusable Texas A&M leadership's, how desperate they were to sweep this under the rug and cover up what they had done, what had happened to this student. And if she hadn't released those videos, if she hadn't worked with my office, and I'd be willing to do that, her having the courage to come forward to me as basically a student whistleblower, A&M would have succeeded. They would have violated this girl's constitutional rights. They would have publicly humiliated her. They would have shamed her, threatened her, mocked her, abused her, and nobody in Texas would know about it.
Now, this was done, I saw one of the videos where the student was talking to the professor and saying this violates President Trump's executive order on gender identity. Even in a classroom situation?
So what President Trump has tried to do and made very clear, and what his administration has had great success in doing, is cutting off taxpayer funding at the federal level for universities and colleges that receive federal taxpayer money who are engaged in this type of transgender indoctrination. And while I'm thrilled to see that on one hand, as somebody who used to work for President Trump, the Trump administration is doing a better job and a more efficacious job getting rid of taxpayer-funded transgender indoctrination in Texas than the Texas government has. And here's a big point we haven't talked about yet. When I wrote this letter to the Trump administration, because I referred Texas A&M for investigation to the Trump administration and to Governor Abbott to take action, you know who responded first? The federal government. The United States Department of Justice under President Trump and Harmeet Dillon, who heads the Civil Rights Division at the Federal Department of Justice, she responded quicker and with more decisive boldness than any official in the Texas government.
What did she say?
She said that she found what I had put out online to be, quote, highly concerning, and committed that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division would be exploring Texas A&M's actions. These are bolder statements than has come out of any official in the Texas government.
And that leads me to my next question, because, you know, what is the state law as it relates to DEI? This was I know that Governor Abbott, you know, certainly highlighted the 2023 law passed by the legislature that he signed, Senate Bill 17, as far as banning DEI. I guess the hiring practices, as far as, you know, professors, et cetera, DEI organizations within the university had to cease operation. Then there were supposed to be follow-ups to ensure that was the case. But that did not cover curriculum at a state university at all, right?
No, it's going to shock a lot of people who have heard people like Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Speaker Burrows, for the last multiple years now, boldly proclaim that Texas has banned DEI, or that Texas has gotten rid of liberal transgender indoctrinations in our public universities. Here's the facts. Those statements are lies. They are not based in any fact. And in fact, not only does SB 17 not ban all DEI in public universities in the state of Texas, SB 17 explicitly authorizes, it explicitly sanctions taxpayer-funded DEI in every classroom, in every public university in the state of Texas, including anything that could even possibly be construed to be in the furtherance of any kind of academic goal or research goal or curriculum or instructions. All of that has not only not been banned by Texas law has sanctioned it. And here's just the brass tacks reality. The Republican leadership in the state of Texas, contrary to their claims, is a big, bold supporter, promoter, and funder with taxpayer dollars of DEI and transgender indoctrination.
So the university didn't do anything wrong then, did it?
Well, the university did a lot wrong. The university is governed by a president. The president has a boss who's called a chancellor, and the chancellor has bosses who are called regents. Every regent is appointed by the governor of the state of Texas. They are his political appointees. And let me tell you something. To you regents, okay, you leaders in any public university in the state of Texas, you don't need the legislature to tell you to not spend my constituents' hard-earned money to indoctrinate the next generation. So they did something that is wrong, immoral, and unethical. But they they very possibly did not violate state law because the state of Texas has not passed a law banning it. But why should we have? I think we should do it. I filed many bills to do so.
Yeah.
But how sad a state are we in when the political appointees of the Republican governor are choosing to spend taxpayer dollars to indoctrinate the next generation? The legislature should not have to step in and stop them.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because
But we do.
if it's not in the state law,
Yeah.
then isn't that an adequate defense for the university to
Not
say,
even close. That is cowardice. That's what somebody that quite frankly should cower and hide their head in shame if they have to say, well, the legislature didn't tell us that we can't discriminate. Because I think these DEI initiatives, I actually think they're discriminatory. Not only are they unethical and immoral, I think they violate multiple provisions of the Civil Rights Act. I think they deprive students of their constitutionally protected civil rights, and it should not be incumbent on lawmakers to have to pass a law to tell to these educrats, hey, don't spend tax money on illegal, unconstitutional indoctrination and discriminatory activities. And this student, I want to be really clear, she was absolutely discriminated against in that classroom.
But you're saying if this happens at a private institution, that's on them.
Well, private institutions are very different. You know, I may have my personal views about what should or shouldn't be taught in private organizations, but if taxpayer money, because let's go back to the basics. The government has no money. The only money the government has comes from the people when the government takes it from them by force. So we, as fiduciaries of taxpayer money, we represent the people, and we should only spend their hard-earned money on things that the people support. That's what I'm talking about here. My comments do not extend to private entities or to private universities. If you want to teach or study LGBTQIA or Black queer literature or whatever, which is, by the way, courses that are taught in almost every public university in Texas, if you want to study things like that in a public university, I may have my personal thoughts on the matter, but what I'm talking about is do not spend my constituents' hard-earned money on that type of leftist garbage.
So let me ask you, because I've
Yeah.
seen the comments, you've probably seen the comments to your comments on X,
Yeah.
where people say, you know, this is why Texas has become dangerous in a sense, is they don't want to hear from different viewpoints.
It's just silly.
So what do you say to that? Because you've seen the comments, I would imagine.
It's laughably absurd. It would be government censorship if government was sending government officials into private entities to censor free speech of private actors. That's not what we're doing. What we're simply saying is if the government is going to have, the state government is going to have publicly funded institutions of higher learning, then the government, and another word for the government is the people get to decide how we spend their money in our publicly funded institutes for higher. In Texas, the A&M in Texas A&M stands for agricultural and mechanical. So the people of Texas have spoken and said, okay, it's okay if you want to spend our hard-earned money to train the engineers and the farmers and the mathematicians and the scientists and the doctors of tomorrow. But it is not okay, and I know this from talking to voters all across the state of Texas. By the way, voters that reelected President Trump in a 14-point landslide on a mandate to end DEI, the voters of Texas are clear. They're sick and tired of being taxed out of their homes. We got some of the highest property taxes in America. Texans are being taxed out of their homes to effectively fund the woke left Democrat agenda of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and AOC and Nancy Pelosi, and they're sick of it. Just because we're saying do not spend our money on woke indoctrination in our publicly funded universities, that is in no way, shape, or form a violation of the free speech rights. And in fact, if there's a constitutional violation somewhere, it is probably by the state government perpetuating a constitutional violation of this student's First Amendment rights, because it was the government acting in a discriminatory fashion against a student in this instance. So no,
silencing her.
By silencing her and by kicking her out of the class. Absolutely.
And
so no.
So what do you want to see happen now?
Well, there's a lot.
Take me through the list that you want to see happen.
Well, I said this the other day. If the state of Texas had good leadership, these people would have been fired the day it happened. If the state of Texas had truly great leadership, the kind we deserve, this never would have happened in the first place. These things are only happening in these public universities because they believe that the regents aren't going to stop them. And the regents clearly don't believe that their boss is going to stop them. So I've asked the governor to do multiple things. Use the authority he clearly has on the appointment process to direct every one of his political appointees at every one of our public universities to fire every individual who's engaged in DEI or transgender indoctrination, to immediately terminate all DEI or LGBTQ activities at those universities, and then as it relates to Texas A&M, to immediately fire the president of the university, who is neck deep in scandal on this, the department head, the professor, and every other person that was involved in this. And then I have been calling on the governor repeatedly and publicly to put adding a ban on DEI and transgender indoctrination onto the special session agendas. I most recently did it. I think it's the third time I've made that request of the governor this year. I do not know why he refuses to add it to the agenda so that we can, clearly we shouldn't, I don't think we should have to do this. The governor, his political appointees, the regents, the chancellors, the presidents, they're big boys. They were put in charge of these universities. They could have ended this nonsense years ago. But since they have clearly proven unable or unwilling to do the right thing by the taxpayers of the state of Texas, the legislature must pass legislation like I have filed countless times to prohibit the expenditure of another penny of taxpayer money on DEI or transgender indoctrination.
So essentially getting rid of all the exceptions in Senate Bill 17.
That's what one of my bills is. Literally just strikes all of the exceptions from SB 17. That would be one easy way to do it, at least as it relates to DEI. But we need to go broader, given the proliferation of transgender indoctrination like we saw in this course.
State Representative Brian Harrison, thank you so much.
Always great to be with you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.